Good afternoon, St. George. This is Michael Harding.
And this is Christina Harding.
And we're here for On the Arts, the opportunity that we have to blow the lid off these little artistic secrets that live here in southern Utah. We've had the pleasure of talking to a lot of wonderful artists around town in many, many different disciplines and with many different focuses. We've had the opportunity to spread the word about things like film festivals and theater productions and concerts. And we've even had Mayor Pike in here to talk about the arts in downtown St. George and all of the sculptures and things of that sort. And every artist that comes in here, they always have the same question: what are we going to talk about? And they think, how are we going to fill this, this 50-minute slot, almost an hour? And my response to all of them is just, you know what? I have no clue what we're going to talk about. Sometimes there are specific things to plug, but for the most part, it really is about getting to know the people that are behind the arts.
Yes, the people in our community.
Absolutely. And there are tons of people here. I don't think people are aware of the number and the caliber of the different artists that we have down here in southern Utah.
Yes, and we've been blown away by the passion that we've seen, especially when we have them in our studio with us, just talking to these guests that we bring in, the passion that they have for what they do. We always mention how excited we are to watch them get excited about their work, and I think that's exhilarating.
Well, and I think when you say for us to watch them, I want to make it known that was quite a sloppy little segue into the fact that even though this is a radio show to be listened to ultimately on 100.3 FM, there are also two opportunities to check out live video of what's happening in here. First off, we do stream live on YouTube as well as Facebook at Radio St. George. That's radio space ST space George. You can find us for a live stream of the show, and it will also be archived. You can check out on that webpage anytime you want to find out these exhilarating facts that you're about to hear.
I think it's rather interesting that we watch video of something on the radio. Is anyone else blown away by that idea? I mean, I remember the days of just radio. You didn't know what they looked like behind the microphone. I kind of liked that, but
everybody sat around and watched the radio.
Watched the radio. It was that's what we did. Now we will have to watch the radio. I'm so confused.
Crazy.
Crazy world.
Well, I want to segue into our guest that we have today here in the studio.
Yep, here he is. Here we go. Here we go.
He's getting ready, warming up his voice. I'm going to tell. I always start out with a little bit of not an insight necessarily, but a personal experience. And I first got here to southern Utah, to St. George specifically. Let's see, it was 11 years ago, back in 2007. And by the way, I always swore I would never live in the desert. I have failed miserably at that swearing. And I have had a lot of experience, like say at the Utah Shakespeare Festival and such, which is southern Utah in general. But my foray to St. George began back in 2007. And I remember I was meeting all sorts of interesting people who were locals of St. George, people who were passing through, people who came from California. I met a lot of different kinds of people. And there was this gentleman in the music department. I had come down here to work in theater and to teach theater. And all I knew about this gentleman is he was the coolest cat I'd ever seen in my life.
Yeah, we miss Gary Caldwell a lot.
Oh, Gary.
Gary Caldwell is the tallest, coolest cat I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, there was a guy who was wandering around the halls, and he just had this very happy, laid-back look on his face all the time. And his name was Glenn Webb. Not Dr. Glenn Webb at the time, but Glenn Webb. And he was new, just as I was new in the theater department, he was new in the music department. And, we both had that kind of wide-eyed, not sure what the heck was going on with life look.
Oh, right.
And I remember I went to the jazz concert, the jazz ensemble. I had never really been to a jazz concert before, and I wanted to support my colleague who had started at the same time I did and wanted to go see/hear his work. And I was expecting the band leader. I don't know if I was thinking about, Glenn Miller instead of Glenn Webb, or, Leonard Bernstein up there conducting the ensemble. But I will say, I was amazed when he came out and his sleeves were kind of rolled up just a little bit, and he was walking around the stage while the ensemble was playing, and I watched him snap his fingers a little bit, and it was the most relaxed I had ever seen as far as a concert, and I also had a great time. and probably the best part about it was watching him have a fantastic time up there, helping people adjust their drum sets, helping people get their sound out there.
I remember one thing from that concert, and one thing only.
Was it me?
No.
Oh, wow, Michael.
We played Maiden Voyage by Herbie Hancock, and that's all I remember. I thought my first concert here, let's play this piece, Maiden Voyage. Does that make sense? It did at the time.
Absolutely. I love how you tie everything together.
Oh, yeah. Life is a web.
A web. Oh, what a tangled web we weave.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it was a fantastic concert. And Glenn, it has been an absolute pleasure being a friend and a colleague, but also hearing your work as an artist and seeing your passion as a teacher and your focus and integrity with these students has been absolutely unsurpassed.
Well, it's darn fun. It feels like my life work, to work with students and have a bit of fun along the way. So
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I understand that you actually grew up here in St. George.
Yep, I did. Born in 2-3 hospitals ago.
Gotcha.
Old Pioneer Memorial.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is no longer there.
Yeah.
I grew up on 700 South, where the Ermitas building is, the restaurant.
Yeah.
That was my boyhood home.
Really?
It was a house instead of a business at that time. Mowed the lawn there that's no longer there, put Christmas lights up there that I don't think they do anymore. But, yeah, that was it.
Well, that's where it was Dixie High School.
Dixie High,
part of it there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And I'm not going to ask the year, but I think it's safe to say that several hospitals ago, we're into the latter part of last century.
It was in the 20th century.
The hand carts, okay.
Glenn pushed his hand cart to school and whatever.
Yes, we all pitched in on that first or second stoplight in town.
Right. Well, let me tell you. So, did you go to Dixie High School?
I did.
Got it. And
I went to Woodward. That's now not a school anymore, but the building is still there. Lived in that same house, went to East Elementary, West Elementary, which have now turned into Heritage and Legacy. Same house, but the boundaries shifted, so I went to 2 different schools. And, then Dixie High.
Got it.
Dixie College after that.
Oh,
So here we are.
You're clearly an established musician now.
Established, yes.
Did you? Were you into music at that time, or were you a football player? What were you?
No, let's not talk about my athletic career much.
I was going to say, I bet he was a football player. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I started drum lessons when I was 7. My mom was taking guitar lessons, and I'm tapping along, 7 years old. And she says, there's a drum teacher in the next studio where I take guitar. Would you like to take lessons? Sure. Who wouldn't want to take drum lessons? So I started at the age 7 and never really stopped.
Gotcha.
Well, I remember last week your son said that he, liked to hit things. And were you the same way? You had to hit something.
I don't know. I like to think I was striking them.
Striking. Oh, there you go. That's when you get that PhD. That's striking.
Well, that's right. Talking about perceptions of instruments, and you say striking them artistically and such. You mentioned Gary Caldwell earlier, who's actually someone I'd love to get on the show at some
we
point.
need to contact him.
Gary, if you're listening, if you're one of our 5 listeners
we'll
now,
be stalking you next.
come on in. I had a conversation with him one time. He, of course, a very accomplished brass player. With trumpet particularly, and also a very accomplished conductor. I remember talking to him probably about our second year here, probably 2008, 2009, about how he had a headache one day, just a pretty severe headache. And then he said, I sat down and played the trumpet and it felt better. Well, I was very ignorant about this. Yes, I played, and I used that term very loosely, I played trumpet in high school, but the best trumpet player by that criteria was the one who could play the loudest out there on the field. So all I knew about the brassy sound was that it was harsh, that it was big, and I started laughing. And this, by the way, I don't need people to make me feel stupid. I do it myself very well. And I started to laugh. And I said, you played the trumpet to get rid of a headache? And I will never forget, he had this wonderful wry smile. He just looked at me and said, an artist makes music on the trumpet, and it can make you feel better.
Yeah, there's a progression in my world. You move from being the drummer to the percussionist and then the musician. So.
Oh, wow. Well, now it says here that you went on to get your Doctor of Musical Arts in Percussion Performance from UNLV.
Yeah, DMA, Doctor of Musical Arts from UNLV.
Oh, wow. And you also have your arm's in the way. I cannot see his bio here. He received his master's in music and percussion from the University of Utah.
Good times there, yep.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Why were those good times?
We're going to hit some hard-hitting journalism here.
Why were they good times? Good friends, a stimulating environment. What you expect. I think I met a lot of folks that I still associate with to this day, a lot of musicians in percussion and out of percussion, some composers that I ended up playing on some of their recordings for.
Mm-hmm. So was it from there that you decided you wanted to teach, or were you thinking you just wanted to be a traveling musician?
Oh, not so much of a troubadour.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted, naively, the best of both worlds. The security of teaching with the warm and fuzzies of a performance career.
Oh, fantastic.
And people told me that doesn't happen. You can't have that.
Really?
Can't have what? The combination?
The combination. You have to commit to one or the other.
One or the other.
To be viable in either of them, you have to commit.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay. And then I went along, and it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I did my bachelor's at Weber State after leaving Dixie College. Got the BA in music education at Weber State. Then had the opportunity for a graduate assistantship at the University of Utah. So I went down there immediately. Spent 2 great years there. Learned a ton at Weber State. Learned a ton at Utah. And then started teaching. And about that same time, I was brought into the Ballet West Orchestra.
Wow.
Because of the contacts I had at the University of Utah.
Right.
So started, October of 93, I think, was probably the first ballet gig that I played.
Oh, wow.
Ended up doing 20 plus years there with the Ballet West Orchestra.
Ballet West.
I think I played 300 plus nutcrackers over all those years.
Wow.
So
You're the Drosselmeyer of the pit.
Yeah, the percussionist plays the actual nutcracker sound, the ratchet. So I was the nutcracker.
You were the
audible
nutcracker.
nutcracker.
Glenn was the nutcracker.
Beneath the stage, and the clock striking 12 midnight. That was also me.
That was
doing
you?
that. Yep.
Fantastic.
Fun times.
You're the sound we remember from that.
We hope so.
That's fantastic. So, and then after you were up north, what made you decide to come back home to your roots?
A job that was open.
That's always the case.
Yeah.
That's the most honest answer I've ever heard.
Harmon's was hiring.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Teaching there, Ogden High, Brighton High, Westlake Junior High, playing with the Ballet West and a few other things, subbed with the Utah Symphony and Opera on occasion. And then looked and thought, I haven't looked what's available college jobs in a while. Maybe I should look and see. First thing at the top of the list, percussion at South Dakota State. I thought, interesting. Never been to South Dakota. Then scrolled down a little more, and there were 3 jobs at Dixie State College in the music department. And so I threw my hat in the ring and got one of them, and here we are now.
Wow.
Well, you mentioned that you had taught at a few high schools and a middle school.
Yeah.
I have to tell you that I have a lot of admiration for high school teachers, certainly, but middle school teachers, amazingly.
Oh,
I can't imagine actually handing middle schoolers mallets.
Right. And I, at one point, I couldn't imagine myself doing that either.
You were like, what am I doing?
It's like, no,
putting my life in my hands.
Someone needs to do that, but not me.
Yeah.
And how did you fall into this, Glenn?
Well, after a dozen years of the high school routines, 11 years actually, of the high school routines, doing pep band, doing the musicals, doing some marching band and stuff, I was ready for a change of pace. And by then, my kids were a little older, so I could deal with a 12-year-old a little better.
Yeah.
So
very true.
I looked for a change of scene, different change of pace, and found a job that was proposed different challenges that I felt like I was ready for at that time.
Right.
And it's a lot more altruistic in the middle school, trying to help the kids put the clarinet together right. Let's produce some tones that are pleasing.
Oh, no.
And you have to shelve some of the higher level ambitions that you have. But the warm and fuzzies, the payoffs are different. They're there, but it's different. And, at that point, wonder what's out in college. Not aspiring to, I'm ready for this next stage of my career, but there was an opportunity, and I ended up with it. And here we are now after that maiden voyage in fall of 07.
Well, I'm going to say you touched on something that I admire very much about high school and middle school teachers, particularly the fact that they can do everything.
Oh yeah.
We're selling you as a percussionist, and you certainly are, and we'll talk a little more detail about that. But when you talk about helping a student put a clarinet together, I don't look at Glenn Webb and say, well, there's a reed player right there, or there's a brass player, or there's a composer. And by the way, Dr. Webb and myself, we did collaborate actually on an original piece our first semester here for a show I was directing, I Hate Hamlet.
I just fabulous show.
Can you write me a waltz? And he was like, sure, I'll do that. And, but anyhow, with middle school and high school teachers, they do seem to be able to do everything in music. You said you started taking drum lessons at 7. How did you learn all this other stuff?
A lot of it in the college courses, because I was a music ed major as an undergrad. But I had a mentor, Farron Holt, who lives here locally. He's a retired teacher now. But he was saying, Webb, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I'm like, all right, is this brainwashing? Should I be worried about this? and I did it. So I learned some saxophone as a teenager. And really, if the Dolphins had fingers, they would be playing saxophone as well. It's not the hardest thing in the world. But it's a beautiful instrument, everyone.
Yes, yes.
I could never play the saxophone. What does that say about me?
Several things.
We won't go into that right now.
No, and I learned to play the trombone or euphonium a little bit, just a little bit here and there, because he figured somebody's got to be the next generation. And it was really a great thing that Farron Holt took me under his wing before I knew that he had a wing and that there was a career and all. He pushed me in a certain direction, and it was right for me. And so I learned a few things before going to college, and then had a good experience, picking up a few of the other things. So you don't have to become a master at all of those things. You have to be able to show how it's put together and basic tone production, and then the kid discovers it himself in most cases.
You find out if they're a musician or not.
Yep.
Well, you did pep band and you did marching band and such. Do you still do pep and marching?
No, I don't.
Lost your pep?
Yeah.
Marched to a different drummer?
I did pep band my first 2 years here. So 07, 08, and 09, I did the pep band, and that has its rewards as well. But I currently don't. Doggone it.
Oh, yeah? Is that a hint? Are you getting excited to get back into that pep?
No, not really. I do love sports, but not looking for
wanting to do the pep
go
thing,
back to pep band. No.
Well, when you came to Dixie College and you're teaching these adults, I can imagine that it was a big adjustment for you. Remembering back to when you were in college and remembering all the mentors that you had. And did you find it was difficult your first year, or did you just get right into it and it was just sliding right into a shoe that fit?
I think I don't want to overstate how easy or how smooth it might have been, because I don't recall. Others
was it a blur?
Well, others might look back and say, "Oh yeah, Webb learned a lot that first year." But it seemed I loved it a lot, and the colleagues that were around me, that we were working together as first year professors, and others that were in the department and in the College of the Arts, what is now the College of the Arts, they helped us along the way.
You've received
I think
support.
It was because I was working with two of the mentors that I had as a youngster, as Dr. Ronald Garner used to always say, the youngsters.
I remember him.
And so I was told just this morning, don't use that word to describe people. They don't want to be called that. But I thought, I didn't mind it when Ron Garner called me a youngster. It's like, okay.
I think Ron Garner can call about 99% of St. George a youngster. Yeah. He is an amazing man.
So working with Ron and Gary Caldwell, who I had classes from them, as a youngster. As a millennial back in the day, a pre-millennial, before millennials were a thing.
Yeah.
You know? So that was fantastic to work with those guys and others.
Uh-huh.
Well, not only have you been performing and teaching, but you founded actually some pretty exciting things. A Grand Circle New Music?
Yeah.
What is this?
We have, well, I've always been interested in it, in new music. You know, that we love the classics, the tried and the true, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, all of those guys. Beautiful music. But I don't know if we can drive around in cars and use our cell phones and computers and completely ignore the art music of today. That seems inappropriate to me, anyway. So it's always been, and percussionists, we don't have things. Bach wrote very little in his orchestral pieces for percussion. Mozart, same thing. Beethoven, your professional rest counters in those situations. You're paid more to be able to count the rest accurately and stand up and play when it's time than the actual execution of much of that early music. So percussionists, we are seeking out 20th century music and 21st century music, just of our nature. We have to have we have to develop our own classics. So that's always interested me. And when I got another colleague, Dr. Robert Matheson, who I think you've had in here before.
Absolutely. We had actually both of you. You called in at that
summer,
point. Yeah.
Yes. That was fun times. So we have a similar mindset about new music, and so we should do this. We should have a series. What should we call it? Zion, St. George, whatever. So we settled upon the Grand Circle, basically reflecting the Grand Circle of the Southwest. That encompasses so many of the natural parks and national monuments.
Oh, okay.
So it's sort of a tourism marketing term that we've co-opted.
Great.
The Grand Circle New Music. We have an event coming up Friday the 16th at the Electric Theater, 7:30.
Oh, fantastic.
Tickets are not available because it doesn't cost anything. It's a free concert.
It's a free concert.
Free concert. Electric Theater, Friday the 16th. Starts at 7:30. It'll be mostly me and Dr. Matheson playing, and some with Dr. Kawhi Yu on the cello.
And we had him on the show
we just
as well.
Had him. Yeah.
Yep. So some works. I think the oldest one that we have was written in 75. We have one that was written this year in 18. So.
Oh.
Do the composers come to listen or to work with you?
When they're pieces that Dr. Matheson and I have written, they do. Yes.
I'm glad you're present.
Yes, we've corresponded with some of the composers that we programmed last spring. A fellow who teaches at NAU and another doctoral student at the University of Utah. We performed their music. So we try and play music from the Grand Circle. So we emailed out just about every college, university, and freelance composer that we could identify in the Grand Circle region, from Albuquerque to Tucson to Phoenix, Vegas to Salt Lake to Denver. This is the Grand Circle region a bit, and had quite a few submissions and selected a couple that worked for our group and performed them and corresponded with them. Neither of them were able to travel, but we wish they would have, and next spring we'll see who we can bring to town perhaps to do that.
Oh, wow.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I really admire is the gumption you had to actually start a group, not only getting a group together to do this, but starting an organization that other people can participate in and hear about. You said, co-opting and using marketing and such, all of these business terms. A lot of people forget that side of show business.
Yeah.
But I have to, it reminds me of a story that I found when I was in South Carolina, there were several of us who were auditioning trying to get into the regional markets, and several of us were not getting cast for a while. And I remember several of my friends just, we went, out to the local pub or what have you down there, and they would just say, oh, well, if nobody will hire us, we'll start our own theater. And that was the joke. And then I actually grew up and became an adult and realized, yeah, that's what you got to do.
Yeah,
and I think that's
go
wonderful.
Out and follow your dreams. Yeah, create it.
Yeah, there's opportunity everywhere.
Yeah.
And we're not getting rich on this by any means, but we are very fulfilled by it.
Yeah.
And bringing something to St. George that St. George lacks. We have, I don't know how long, 35-year history of the Southwest Symphony. That is wonderful. That's incredible. Great choral organizations with longevity and with artistic merit. But we were lacking in the new music world. So if not us, who?
Right.
So we did it, We've probably been going 3 years now, 2.5, 3 years, as the Grand Circle New Music.
Oh, that's great.
As if that weren't enough, and you talk about how we weren't necessarily here in St. George a new music kind of place, you were also founder and artistic director of the St. George Jazz Festival.
Yes, we've had 2 very successful years in February. We talked about it on and off with some of the folks from the St. George Arts Council. When are we going to do this? We should do this. And then a small group of us decided, all right, we need to sit down at a table and see what it's going to take and what our options are. So we did it. And with some support, we are supported now by the St. George Arts Council Rap Tax and the Washington County Rap Tax,
fantastic.
which is wonderful things that our community has supported. We can say in St. George, Southern Utah now, that the community supports the arts. I had a conversation recently with someone about new music in France, where the government allots a lot more music funding to the arts than they do in the United States. But we have a great thing going on with the rap tax, and everyone should support that and support the organizations that that use those funds.
Yes, yes.
Gotcha. Well, let me ask you about what was the state of jazz when you got here to St. George? I remember seeing you walking around and thinking, well, there's a jazz man. And also you have, just to do a quick plug here, you do a radio show as well, don't you?
Yeah, right here on this station, Fridays, 7 to 9 p.m. It's the Glenn Webb Hour.
The Glenn Webb Hour.
Yes. And then people say, but it's 2 hours. I said, don't you expect... don't you get more than you expect sometimes? So, yeah.
That's bonus there.
I do want to start a show called Music in the Glen and just have Glenn Webb, Glenn Miller, Glenn Gould. We could have a lot
Webb.
of absolutely. Yeah. This could be a lot of fun.
All right.
Can we work on that? You guys need to sit down and collaborate and get this together.
You guys really just need to, those of you who are listening, you need to check out Facebook so you could have seen the look on Dr. Glenn Webb's
face. He's actually
face.
thinking about it.
How many Glens are there? Glenn Campbell, could we bring him in?
Absolutely. Special guest. Special guest. He's a special Glenn. All right.
Yeah.
I got you. So you came here. What was the state of jazz? Did you find that there was a large community already set here who wanted jazz?
I think so. Although at that time I wasn't ready to fully engage in it. I was trying to get myself established at Dixie State initially and get things going, essentially taking over the jazz program that was just gifted to me. Take this, grow it.
You look like a jazz man. Take the program.
Huh. So here we are. And then connecting with other musicians that there is this might be the golden age of jazz in St. George because I'm ignorant of most of the history. There's been, I know, the one that I do know, Stan Smoots, back in the day after World War II, through the 50s and 60s, there were great things going on. Dr. Garner brought in, started the celebrity concert series that brought in Rafael Mendez and other jazz musicians. So there were things going on throughout our history. But I think things are more visible now because of some of the social media things and some of the venues that we have that support jazz.
Yeah, I have to say, when I think about jazz, I think of, those small smoke-filled bars, and aren't a whole lot of those in St. George.
No. We do jazz in coffee shops, in art centers, places now. Even Stevens, I'll be at Even Stevens on the 9th, Friday the 9th. The Glenn Webb Quintet, because I haven't thought of a better name yet.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. The DeFiore Center supports jazz quite a bit, too, up there. Affogato has jazz in there several days, well, I think week. A lot. We'll say a lot. I don't know how much.
I can imagine these are well attended.
I think so. Yeah. The things at the DeFiore Center, which happen generally the third Tuesdays, they are standing room only.
Wow.
And they're looking to expand their facilities to put a bigger crowd into. We describe them as jazz education events because there's a wide range. People who have spent a lot of time in the jazz scene in other cities that have moved to St. George. And then we have the novices that, what is jazz all about? I'm interested in this. How much does it cost to come in here? Nothing. Come in, sit down, and enjoy it. So they're going to open up probably double or triple the size of the room where we do the jazz in. So eventually.
Wow.
I'm not sure. It may be in this coming year when we start swinging hammers up there.
That's great. I didn't even know that.
And we got, first night happening downtown. We're getting people to come downtown, and the DeFiore Center is just right up the street.
Just right up the hill.
Right by the Opera House.
Yep, just
right
half a block up there.
Well, I would love to be educated in jazz.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something that I've learned just by being a colleague of yours and a friend of yours is that jazz is a lot more than what I was giving it credit for. You actually said something to me that I quote actually quite often, just so you know. You came up to me one time in the hallway, and by the way, I'm going to be real honest here. Glenn and I, we're both artists, and we've had times where we went after each other. Is that
we've shared differences of opinions?
We shared them very forcefully, as a matter of fact. But one of the things I appreciate about Glenn is after every one of those artistic struggles that we've had, it always ends with, I respect you as a man, I respect you as an artist, we disagree on this, but let's move on.
Rather than avoid that guy, he has terrible taste, let's just say, okay, this is where we differ and this is where we're alike. And
we found actually a lot more places we're alike. But I remember the way you put it, I thought was wonderful. And this was in one of our apology sessions where we became human again with each other after being artists.
Warm and fuzzy alert.
Warm and fuzzies came back.
You just said, you know what? I've come to realize I know just enough about theater to be dangerous. And then I had to, say back, I know just enough about music to be dangerous. That's, I think, the perfect place to be for collaboration, as long as nobody feels like they know. For example, myself, I don't know more about music than I actually do. And it's important for me to be working with people like you who know music. Now, that being the case with jazz, I would love to be educated about this. And this is something I don't know that our listeners know. I know, Wynton Marsalis, and Miles Davis, and that's jazz to me. That's it. There's a whole world out there, and just by knowing you, I've been introduced, only scratching the surface certainly, but introduced. What is your jazz? What really gets you, for lack of a better word, jazzed?
But
what gets me jazzed?
Get you jazzed.
Oh, I don't know.
They're going to hit me. You can...
I love most of it. But jazz starts from ragtime and the blues 100+ years ago until now. I went to just last week to a concert, Kamasi, Washington, and the West Coast Get Down.
I love that.
Yes. And so everything you can imagine is under the jazz umbrella, and nothing has gone completely out of style. We still have a fervent ragtime segment of society. We have swing bands. That I also lead the Rebel Jazz Band. We play a series of dances and concerts around. We're planning a holiday show in December, so maybe I'll put a plug in there when I have a date and venue for that.
Yes.
But so big band is great. That was probably when jazz occupied the most commercial success and visibility in the world. It's the swing era. But the 50s, 60s, is another classic era that I adore a lot. But I really still believe, the Glenn Webb Quintet will play music from the last few years. And I mine the 80s a lot for some fun music, because melodies that have stuck with me throughout my adult life, I have to present those in a jazz setting now. So composers that you wouldn't think as jazz end up being jazz. Cyndi Lauper, Kenny Loggins, maybe even Willie Nelson. We'll see.
Well, Willie Nelson, yeah.
Are you a fan of, I just have to ask this, Postmodern Jukebox? Do you know them?
Yes, and I am a fan, but I'm not crazy about them.
Right.
Because I really admire what they've done, but then I see so many things on the social media. It's like, wow, they never take an hour off, let alone a day. I think that, so I have a little bit of postmodern jukebox saturation going on, but I use it in examples in the jazz history course that I teach. Seven Nation Army, I think, is one of them that they have done in a wonderful classic style. And there's several others that, okay, this song, teaching the youngsters, this song, imagine it in a jazz setting. And we often make fans of jazz through that. Get that hook of, I know this song, how would it sound if it were done in the 40s, 50s, 60s or something. So that's fun.
Yeah.
I've heard some amazing things from them. Some of it, I have to admit, that they cover such a wide range of music, and they try to do a wide range of music. Some of it isn't to my taste.
Right.
I have a lot of respect for what they do. But boy, when you hit on a song you grew up with that you absolutely love, Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper, or, you've got a lot of Michael Jackson out there. Thriller, done as a 1930s big band.
Oh, yeah, we do in the Rebel Jazz Band Billie Jean as a swing tune.
Really?
Oh.
I've got to hear that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That iconic bass line, just swing it. Billie Jean, da 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 da. I'm singing on the radio.
You just did it, Glenn. Yay!
I love it, that moment when one of our guests just opens up and they start sparkling.
Now we're all going to be
that
singing
was
that.
sparkle,
Yes,
ladies and gentlemen. That was my sparkle.
I'm going to turn down the brightness on our broadcast here.
Now I'm singing Billie Jean in my head. That's going to be in there all day.
I really do want to hear that.
I do
that sounds
too.
great.
The jazz band in December, our concerts, I've passed out my arrangement of Material Girl by Madonna. We'll be playing that.
Okay, can I just mention that Michael Harding is a fan of that song? I just let everybody out in the radio
December
world know
5th.
that.
I mean, December 5th, I am a fan of old Madonna.
Madonna.
Well, I guess I don't think she's one of our five listeners. So, early Madonna, I should, because right now she is older Madonna, we should say. But yeah, that the early stuff, Like a Virgin and Material Girl and things like that. Yeah, I grew up in the 80s.
I just found this out about a year
Holiday,
ago. I was pretty blown away when I found this out a year ago from my husband. We've only been married 8 years, so yeah.
He's got a lot of skeletons in that closet, I think.
I think so too.
But I am actually looking forward to hearing that.
That's December 5th?
Uh-huh.
Oh, my.
Yep.
Oh, we're not
Eccles
missing
Main
that
Stage
one.
Theater.
Oh, we can't miss that one. That'll be your Christmas present.
$5 general admission, $1 for students, and I guess faculty. I don't know what faculty
Only
pay.
$5 too.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked a lot about the Dixie State stuff that you do, and of course that goes along with being a teacher. You're trying to inspire the students, and the only way to do that, in my opinion, is to do it with them, to push them to do it.
And to do,
you do a lot outside as well.
Oh my word!
You play. I mean, the list here is longer than my arm of the things that you do. You've been playing for how many years in the pit at Tuacahn?
I think since 2009.
Oh,
I think so. Aida was the first show that I did. Aida and Annie.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And you've been there ever since, every year?
Yes.
Wow.
In fact, you have a cot you set up. And,
they have a little...
no cots.
No cots, but they have the Glen corner. Yeah, there.
Yeah, I have in my own little corner, like Cinderella.
In your own little chair.
Yes.
Your own little timpani.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's been great to see the changes in their company.
Really?
We started out in 2009, and others in the community played before me on just the cement there on the audience's left. And you dealt with wind. Wind is nice sometimes if you're sitting in the audience and it cools you down a bit when it's 85, 90, 95 degrees at Tuacahn. But when you have sheet music there, wind is a whole different experience. And then bugs, which are attracted to the stand lights.
Oh, no.
know. So that was a different era. And now they've built the indoor pit basically in the very same spot beneath the overflow seating, or I don't know if we call it overflow seating, but the seating to the left of the audience there, a fairly decent-sized room to fit. I think we had 16 musicians in there this summer.
60?
16.
16.
Oh, 16.
16.
Yeah, no. Just in the teens. So it's a blast doing some of the things like Aladdin before it went to Broadway.
Yes.
Doing Hunchback of Notre Dame, which hasn't, I don't think, gone to Broadway, but we were like the second or third group to do that.
Oh, that was a beautiful production.
Fun stuff. The one this year, Prince of Egypt. That is headed to the West End in London now.
Wow.
And then I think eventually to Broadway. But to, some of the old standards, there is a performance tradition that you kind of have to follow, and that's wonderful. But to do new works really is exhilarating to me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I think that I can't speak to some of the things that they've shared that will be happening in the future, but Tuacahn is a great gig because of some of those things.
That's wonderful. Wow.
We talked about in the pit when we were doing Matilda, and some of those tunes that just rock, and the plot points that happen in the songs and the things they talk about. You hit that final note, and the audience erupts like you're the Beatles or something. That's cool.
Chills.
Yes, that's fun stuff.
I think that's exciting, and I think it would be fun too, just to watch those actors up there as you're playing. That you're helping.
We can't see too many of them. The way it's situated here, I could see. In Prince of Egypt, I could only see extreme stage right.
So, wow. So you're listening just to make sure that they're right on with it.
Yep.
That's interesting.
And the conductor has a monitor where he's able to see more of the full stage, as well as the big bay window there.
Okay.
But we're more listeners than observers.
Do you get air conditioning in there?
Yes.
You're going to be some of the most loved and some of the most hated artists.
Yeah, with friends and family that come out, and I will pop out at intermission, and they're sweating, and I'm like,
Why are you doing so well?
Yeah. I was chilly during that performance.
Yes. I have claimed the remote for one of the air conditioning units in there for the past several years, and I will hold on to it until they pry it from my cold dead
I
hands
bet
or something.
I'm sure it could get pretty hot in those little spaces there.
Yeah.
So now you've done this since 2009 at Tuacahn.
I think that's when it was.
So you teach when this fall semester starts. You're teaching, and then you head right out there because
head out. Yeah.
Wow.
It's when people told me you can't do that, you can't teach and perform at the same time. I think they're talking about the challenges of each of those things of being a professional, but also the grind of it. And I just when I left graduate school at Utah with my master's in percussion performance, and I was teaching at Ogden High, and they asked me to come play in the ballet. It's like, I'm not going to turn this down. And so for most of my adult life, my working career, I've been doing both and then never stopped doing it.
Wow.
I've always thought it was part of our responsibility as artists to teach others, whether it be in a formal institution or just, with apprentices or journeymen or people who look up to us and such.
And I can turn to every student and empathize. Yes, this is hard. This is easy. These are challenges. I am expected to be on time. I'm expected to produce good tone quality. I'm expected to be professional. Just all of that. Like, okay, yes, you should be on time to rehearsal. I am on time. You should be on time. We play in tune. We play together. We respect one another as colleagues, musicians. All of that professional world I try to model in rehearsals.
Yes.
So
yes.
for better or for worse,
Yes.
Let's say, before we move on to the next topic, and like I said, we do have quite a long list of things.
My goodness.
I just have to ask you, I've never played in an orchestra pit for a show or what have you. Certainly there would be shows that are exhilarating to play, but I've heard rumors of shows out there that are just deadly to play. They're just boring beyond belief. Have you dealt with many of those?
Yeah. Some that are less appealing for a percussionist or less appealing for just my appetite for a plot. The King and I thought was beautiful music, and I hated the plot. Stop trying to convince the guy, an adult at this point in his life, to change his life.
He's an old dog. Yeah.
He's an old dog. Go home. End at intermission. So that plot didn't work for me, but I love the music.
And that was just the conductor talking to you as the percussionist.
Yes. What's the other one? My Fair Lady. Long scenes. Some fun music, but it seemed like it was a long book, a long play that was made into a long musical. I open a bag of M&Ms, spread it on the tom-tom next to me, and just slowly watching the show and see if I can get the last M&M in my mouth before I have to play that drum. And
an
they
hour
don't
melt.
later,
Yeah,
they don't melt.
They don't melt because you got your air conditioning.
So like 90. That was at UMT, Utah Musical Theater, with Jim Christian.
I worked there. When did you do that?
Late 80s, maybe into 90 or 91.
Oh, okay, gotcha. It was 94 was actually the first year I worked at Utah Musical Theater. Actually, we just missed each other there.
And he was eating M&Ms. You could have been
Absolutely.
in that production.
Yeah, I'm glad you had that air conditioning.
And now we know to get Glenn M&Ms
rain
to
in
survive.
Spain.
Oh, no. Yeah, well, yeah.
So, again, fun music, but terribly long scenes.
Yes.
And I felt like I couldn't read because if I get engaged in something,
you would miss your cue.
Miss the cue.
Yeah, can't do that. Yeah.
And that was pre the cell phones,
Right.
So
you went to that. You got to.
You do that.
You do that.
You do that.
We're debating here.
That's
We're debating. There's like this
you
long
certainly
list.
have. You've set up so many structures here in Southern Utah for percussionists and for musicians and students, and I think it's more than admirable. I can't quite think of the right word of how you truly have embodied this area. Because, of course, you're from here. You came back here to give and to offer. I just want to say thank you for that. We actually had your son on our last show,
week,
Zach Webb, and it's really fun to listen to him talk. Knowing you, I can hear some of the same cadences, some of the passion for it. Do you have other kids who are into music?
All of them played growing up, but none of them are into it like Zach. My daughter Jessica, who is a DSU alumna, she played violin growing up and played a year or so in the student orchestra here at Dixie State.
Wow.
When she got more into her major, the schedules just didn't work out. So our youngest son of Carrie and myself, he played trombone growing up and just came back from England. He's at UVU studying political science, a degree that we don't have here now. I don't think he's playing much now. But they grew up, we had rules in our house, of course. You have to play music and like it, and you had to watch soccer and like it. And
you are a big Salt Lake Real fan.
Yep. So
fantastic. I'm looking over your bio that just goes on forever, which is amazing.
Who wrote it? I don't know.
I don't know. Somebody wrote this long, beautiful tribute, but
pulled it off of several websites.
It's like the eulogy.
Well, you were a featured performer in the 2002 Cultural Olympiad with Jose Limon Dance Company and the Repertory Dance Theater.
Yeah,
wow.
that was wild. When they have the Olympics, there's always a cultural Olympiad, they call it. So just a big arts festival that goes along with it. So between teaching at Brighton High, doing the stuff with Ballet West and these other companies, it was nonstop whirlwind that February of 2002. The Jose Limon Dance Company is a modern dance company that, I believe from New York, but they were presenting in Salt Lake. And brand new works, that it was incredibly demanding, but a blast. The composer wrote a huge setup that would not fit in a room twice this big close. I was on roller skates almost. Timpani, gong, a ton of drums, marimba, xylophone, bells, cymbals everywhere. So when we performed in the stage at Weber State, the Ostad Auditorium, I think almost half the pit was percussion instruments.
Wow.
And a bunch of the score was just the percussion and the piano along with the dancers, and then many other wind and string instruments too. But that was really a highlight of things. And doing I think it was the Rieger piece, My Red Fires, or with My Red Fires with the Repertory Dance Company. That was a blast too.
Well, I have to tell you, as is always the case with the show, at the very beginning, we think, what are we going to talk about?
And then
we are at time, actually, for this show.
But before we end, though, I have to say one thing about Glenn Webb. Years ago, I decided to come back to school, and I was going to be a music major. But then I decided, oh, no, I think I'm going to go transfer and be a theater major instead. But I have to say, you were over the music department at the time, and you were so approachable. And I thought, I can just go in this guy's office, and I felt comfortable to talk to you. And it was one thing, being a returning student, you know, I was an old lady here coming back to school, to see all these students, none of them were afraid to speak to you. Your doors opened to those students.
That's why we're here. I mean, not just to build a resume or a eulogy there, but it's a blast to work with the students, help them discover their passions. You're a great example. You came as a musician and then discovered your passion in theater, and to hold her back from that would be
you were so supportive.
Disservice.
You were just supportive, and I remember and I always felt like I could just talk to you, you know, here, and that means so much when you're coming back to get your degree, especially returning students that are not sure if we're going to be able to get through the second time. So thank you.
Returning students are often more open to mentorship or advice on things than the millennials who might know as much as
everything.
You.
Well, I do have to say, I think I do speak for every one of our 5 listeners, as well as anybody else out there. Thank you very much, Dr. Glenn Webb, for everything you've offered as an artist, as a teacher.
Taking the time to be here.
All right.
When do you have time?
I don't know.
And if you are interested in finding out more about Dr. Glenn Webb, he does have a website. And that's a website that just hit me at www.glennwebbmusic.com. That's GLENNWEBBMUSIC.com. And I think you'll find a very impressive list of accomplishments. And
catch his radio show.
Absolutely. And that's Fridays 7 to 9.
7 to 9.
One of the longest hours you'll have, 7 to 9, 2 hours. And we do hope that you'll stay with us. Come visit us again on Thursday at 4 p.m. for another episode. And we'll continue to get to know the artists down here in southern Utah. Until you hear from us again, we hope you'll keep your focus on the arts.